Amidst the confusion during the early days of the flood in northwest Queensland, the one thing people knew that needed to be done was to help what animals they could. Thank goodness for the helicopter pilots who immediately made themselves available to render whatever assistance was needed. There was a lot of organisation that went on behind the scenes to mount such a huge relief effort, and Patsy and David Fox from Fox Helicopters were part of that effort. Thanks so much, Patsy.
No worries, thanks.
So tell me what the early days were like at the start.
At the start, that around that Australia Day weekend, it had started to rain and we were actually away, and we had 3 pilots here with our machines, and they were just doing normal early flood, what we would consider a flood effort, moving stock to higher ground that the boys know is traditionally an area that they need to get the stock out of. And they'd been doing that for a few days. Then as it all started to unfold, we realised that this was not a normal flood, a polite flood, if Jane Carter calls it a polite flood, when it's just nice and you can manage it, but this just was totally something different. And once our local disaster group was stood up, we realised we were going to need some help.
So you are part of that disaster group, aren't you? So
here in Richmond, through the council, the local disaster management group, during the year they call for expressions of interest for assistance in the case of a flood, for helicopter aerial assistance. So we went through our normal process. Fox Helicopters, we put in an expression of interest to council, and we were put on a preferred panel supply list by the local disaster management group. So when that was stood up in the first instance, and David started talking to John Wharton, our mayor, and we realised we were going to need help, we were stood up, and then we started contacting friends and colleagues to come and work with us through that part of it.
Yeah. So how many helicopters did you end up with assisting in this Richmond area?
Well, for us through Fox Helicopters, we ended up, there was approximately 13 helicopters and 15 pilots, but there was some other private operators that were there. There could have been up to 17, 18 helicopters, and that's not taking into account the military that came to assist.
So what goes into that sort of coordination in arranging the helicopters and then working out where they're going, what they're doing? So
initially, so there was a number of things in logistics that we knew we were not going to be able to cope with. So our avgas was depleting. We got down to about 2 drums of avgas. David started talking to the local disaster group, John Wharton, and that's the military then became involved. Of course, our roads were all cut. So it was, things like then the military came out, they assessed us for getting their larger helicopters in with their pods, with avgas and some Jet A1. And then we realised, okay, we need drums. We've got to decant this into drums so then we can eventually start taking it to different points for the machines to refuel and for here. So we put out a call for people for avgas drums, and the boys started slinging them back to the airport. Those sorts of things started to happen.
So much that people don't realise that needed to happen. Yeah.
Because black soil, Kelly, you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You flat out getting to your shed, getting a 4-wheeler, there is no hope of moving around.
Yeah.
So aviation-wise, helicopters was ideal, and we had the R44s were a great little workhorse, and they started slinging, carrying, surveying.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask next. What sort of things did those pilots have to do?
So initially it was surveying. We were looking at what was unfolding.
And taking the owners of places or managers.
That's exactly right. So in those initial, then once the roads opened, because we had a lot of people away on that long weekend, or they're putting children back in boarding school or starting boarding school for the first time. So that once they could get to Richmond, it was then taking them home and seeing what had happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, the pilots themselves probably needed counselling for what they were seeing, but they would have ended up being counsellors to those cattle producers.
Absolutely.
That saw their animals.
That was the first point of call to them, and knowing that prior to this, they'd been cutting fences, opening gates, moving stock if possible.
So they'd land their chopper.
If they could.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem. You couldn't land.
That would have been, seeing cattle or animals suffering and not being able to land or get near them, that would have just been horrendous.
Oh, absolutely. And our pilots, they're stockmen themselves, so they take their work very seriously, and low stress stock handling, that's part of our catch cry. And to see some of the things that they were seeing and what was unfolding, it took a toll. So Patsy, like in those, in the beginning of that flood, and once it was all over, everyone was sort of worried about, the work that was going to be available. So what sort of year have you had? We've had a up and down year, Kelly, for us. Not as much mustering as would be, and that's understandable.
There's not as many cattle.
There's not as many stock. But we've still, mustering's our core business, but during the drought we've realised we've had to go out and beyond our boundaries and add different things on our AOC. David's, he's ag accredited, so we do a lot of herbicide, poisoning, spreading, photography, survey. We've had to just really go beyond and look at the what else other than mustering. So we've been able to do a few other things this year. We ventured into a new business in tourism. So we're trying to reinvent ourselves a little bit.
And that's probably, a good thing that comes out of something so terrible is you have to think outside the box. Patsy, when you did start doing that first round of mustering, were more cattle turning up in other on other properties? So
yes, there was quite a few stories like that. Some very different brands in paddocks.
That would have been a big thing for people to draft and find out who owned what.
Yes, and we were still looking for a few horses there well into the year, and I'm happy to say a few have turned up. Some haven't, but that's another thing. We were trying to locate some horses for people. And Patsy, you were talking before about the government response. So how did you find that? Well, from the outside looking in, it seemed there was assistance just about immediately for producers and people who are directly affected by the flood, which really injected a lot of confidence for people to get back, get fencing, some of their infrastructure, their poly and troughs and things like that. And I know David and I have always said, even through the drought, if our producers and our farmers, our cattle producers are being assisted, well then they may still think to keep on the contractor, still keep that helicopter coming in to muster or put that fence up or keep the day worker on. From the outside looking in, I think the response from all tiers has been very good.
I think it was such, the sheer enormity of what happened really stirred so much emotion.
Absolutely,
in people.
A Category D disaster. It was truly overwhelming, and that's from an outside looking in as we providing aviation support, but we weren't directly affected as such in the flood. But of family and friends have lost entire herds, half herds, 50-80%, and then that's not the infrastructure as well. How did David cope?
As his wife, and he was seeing that horror unfolding. How did he cope emotionally from that point of view?
David's he's one of those characters where he sees that something has to happen, and I think it was all right. I see what needs to be done. Let's just get in and get that done. And he's very quick thinking. The logistics of what had to happen. It was things through the time with the military, the avgas. Then it was setting up as the roads opened, working with people to work out stockpiling hay. Then the logistics of getting avgas to that point and what areas to cover, where to send different machines. So we were doing SES drops for food, some medical drops. There was the slinging of hay. There was quite a few different operations going on. But it has taken a toll, but at the time it was And every pilot was the same. There's a job to be done. We need to get in and get this done quickly.
Organised
and
chaos.
Efficient. It was too. And things that I had thought of in the initial was we set up at the airport as support out there. I hadn't thought about feeding people, washing clothes. We thought we had the military, all the pilots, and we had 2 local ladies, one in particular just turned up to have a cup of coffee and saw what was unfolding, and then through her and local community groups, it just all happened.
I heard a story about the washing getting done. Yeah.
It was amazing. They had it all worked out. Oh, yeah.
It would have been like a big boarding school trying to working out who owned what socks.
No, it was very well done. There was bags with names and depending on where they were staying. Yeah. But I tell you, getting that black soil out of jeans is not an easy task.
Oh, thanks so much for your time, Patsy, and sharing your story and your part of the part you played in assisting everybody. So thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks so much for watching our video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please try to remember to just click on the subscribe button so we can keep you updated with everything that's happening. Thank you.